The Cerberus is one of the hardest bosses in the game, and even with characters like Jiru and Namche Young, it can still be very difficult. However, this is where Alicia Blanche comes in, as she's an amazing hunter with a huge amount of freezes and damage, which makes her one of the best characters for this boss. But with any character, to make them good, you have to build them correctly, which is why today I'm going to go over how you can best build Alicia Blanche. So as I normally do in these kinds of videos, let's start off with her best artifacts. And the very first gear set that I think is going to be her best gear set, or at least very close with one of the other gear sets, is going to be the Solid Foundation gear set, as this gear set is all about increasing your basic attack damage as well as also your core attack damage, which if you look at Alicia's kit, you'll see that she is very built around doing core attack damage, which straight away will make this one of the best gear sets for her. And with one of the potential upcoming shadows being Tusk, we might be able to increase our core attack damage even further, but that's not confirmed yet. Then the next best thing, or might even be the best thing, is going to be the Toughness gear set, as it's pretty much just the standard gear set for any DPS in the game that can crit. As on the 2 set effect, you can increase your own crit rate by 8%, always very nice, and then on the 4 set effect, you can increase your critical hit damage by an additional 32%, which is kind of the main reason why you're going for this 4 set bonus, is just so you can get the crit damage increase, as it can actually be surprisingly easy to get the max cap of 50% crit rate, so the 2 set effect isn't as good as what it maybe could have been, but either way you can still get a massive bonus of 32% crit damage. And then the final gear set you can choose to use for her is going to be the Armed gear set, as pretty much this is kind of like the only other gear set that's going to increase her damage by a meaningful amount anyways, as on the 2 set effect you can increase your attack by 5%, which is always amazing, and then the 4 set effect you can ignore up to 15% of your target's defense when attacking, so another really good bonus right there. And in the future, maybe when we get some other characters that can boost and stack attack a lot more easier, then hopefully this gear set will be even better. And then for accessory sets, because she's a DPS, you do have a ton of options you can choose from, and the first and probably the best accessory set that I would recommend for her is going to be the Champion on the Field gear set, as this is sort of like the expert gear set but mainly made for hunters, as if you want to use this set you must always have it on the 4 set effect, as basically whenever you land a crit you'll be able to increase your attack by 5% for 4 seconds. However, normally with the 2 set effect you can only stack this once. However, with the 4 set effect you can actually end up stacking it 4 times as well, so you can get a really quick and easy 20% attack increase, so you can get a bunch of extra damage. Then the next best thing I'd recommend is going to be the Executioner gear set, as you can just get a free 20% damage increase when enemies are 70% or less HP, so always very good. However, the only downside with this gear set is it's really bad for things like Power of Destruction, as when you attack the dragon's main body, because it's got so many health bars, you're never going to be able to proc that bonus. And then the next accessory set that I recommend is going to be Concentration of Firepower, as the reason why this is so good is because when you get the 4 set effect you can increase not only your basic skill damage by 18%, but you can also reduce the cooldown of them completely by 18% as well. However, this does come with a drawback of increasing your mana point consumption by 20%, so if you find yourself struggling with mana point consumption, then you can use a character like Juhi to then remedy that. So then moving on, let's talk about her very best stats, and starting off with her main stats on her artifacts, and attack or attack percent are going to be the best things for your helmets. And then as always, the body armor as well as the gloves always will give you defense and also attack. And then for the boots, you can either go for one of 2 things, which are either going to be attack percent or critical hit damage. It doesn't really matter too much which one you go for. And then moving on to accessories, obviously you'll always get HP on the necklace. And then for the bracelet, you'll want water damage, because obviously she's a water character, so you're going to want water damage to increase the damage that you do. And then the ring is just the exact same as the helmet. Additional attack or attack percent is going to be your best bet. And then finally, the earrings will always give you additional mana points. So then moving on to substats for her artifacts, and pretty much it's just always going to be the damage increase ones, because she's a DPS. So things like attack percent are going to be one of your highest valued substats, as you want to increase her attack stats as much as possible so you can get your biggest damage increases. And then things like crit rate as well are going to probably be your next best thing, so you can crit a ton with her, so you can get even bigger damage with your core attacks. And then pretty much you can just go with anything else from then on. Things like mana point cost reduction, defense penetration, and then also damage increase are also amazing substats for her. And then for the accessories, it's exactly the same, but just instead of crit rate, it will be crit damage instead. And then of course, in order to make a hunter broken, you're going to need to equip them with a pretty good weapon. And of course, Alicia's best weapon is going to be the Witch of the Snowstorm, which is her exclusive weapon, which you can get 2 copies for free if you play all of the current events that are currently out, so make sure you do those, as this weapon is obviously an attack scaling weapon, weapon. And essentially what this will do, it will just increase your core attack damage by 10%, and then whenever you have the Ice Body Armor effect, which is a shield that she applies, I believe, through her first basic skill as well as her QTE skill, then you can increase your water damage that you deal by 5% for 20 seconds, and then that damage increase has a cooldown of 30 seconds, but because the buff actually lasts for 20 seconds, it means the cooldown should only be around like 10 seconds. And then at max dupes, this weapon does become kind of insane because you can get a 40% increase in core attack damage and then a 20% increase in water damage when you have the Ice Body Armor effect. And then if you somehow don't get Alicia's exclusive weapon, at least one of them for free, then I guess there's a good amount of SR options, as obviously you have the Steel Dagger to increase your basic attack damage, so which can be useful. The Steel Bow, if you're definitely going for the toughness gear set, can be another good choice. And then the Steel Longsword is another fantastic choice if you do have the elemental type advantage over your enemies. So when it comes to making some of your characters extremely OP, one of the most important things is actually leveling up your skills, as things like her core attack Frost Arrow can go from like 1000% to like 1500%, so you can get a really big like percentage increase in damage. But overall, which one of these 7 skills are going to be the best ones for you to level up? And starting off with her core attack, as I mentioned before, being Frost Arrow, this will deal 1050% of her attacker's damage, going all the way to 1575% of her attacker's damage. And because this is what her kit is all based around, so you're going to want to increase this the most so you can get the most amount of damage from it. And then the next 2 things are going to be her 2 basic skills, being Ice Needle as well as Winter Storm, as pretty much because her kit is also based around using her skills in order so she can apply the Frost buff, it does make her skills being Winter Storm again and also Ice Needle really good valuable options for you to level up and definitely focus on. However, just keep in mind when you do level up basic skills, you are going to increase the mana point consumption in exchange for just a huge amount of extra damage, so just keep that in mind. Then next up, I'd probably recommend Touch of Winter, which is her basic attacks, as pretty much because if you have the solid foundation gear set, you can get your core attacks pretty quickly just by pressing your basic attacks, so you might want to use them a good amount, so you'll be able to get an extra bunch of damage from that. And then I'd probably then recommend the ultimate, Absolute Zero, as it's got a pretty fat multiplier of like 4.6k percent of her attack, so really good damage from that, and it also does apply 5 instances of the Frost effect, so that'll always be nice. And then the final thing I'd probably say that's actually worth it is the Eternal Frost, which is her QTE skill, so you might as well increase the damage that it deals. And then for the support skill, I wouldn't really ever recommend leveling this up, as it only offers a 2-second freeze as well as just a shield, so which is not really that useful, so I wouldn't really recommend leveling this up at all, to be honest. And then something that's also going to be extremely important when using Alicia is going to be her teams, and especially where you position her in those teams. So then of course the very first team is obviously going to be a Cerberus counter team, as this whole team is basically centered around with Juhi supplying heals as well as mana point increase as well, because then we have characters like Seojiru and also Alicia who are going to use a lot of basic skills, so then they don't ever have to worry about whether they've got enough mana or not. And then also when building Alicia teams, you're definitely going to want to make sure you have her in either the 3rd or 2nd slot, as whenever you're doing your rotations and stuff like that, you're going to want to have her in these slots, mainly because with her passive you're going to want to apply as many of the Frost buffs as you can, as you mainly benefit when you have 3 or more. So then in order to achieve this very consistently, you're going to want to have her in these slots, as the only way you can get 3 within one rotation is by having her use her QTE skill and then both of her basic skills. So then this next team is going to be an extremely just well-rounded universal team, as it consists of Baekhyunho, Min Byung-gu, and then obviously Alicia, as Baekhyunho is probably one of the most perfect tanks in the game. I actually really like him a lot. He's probably one of my most used characters, as because he's able to support you with damage as well as also break damage. So if you're coming up against bosses and stuff like that do have break meters, especially replenishable ones, then he is a fantastic choice. And as I mentioned before, of course, he can apply those defense decreases. And then if you don't know what Min Byung-gu does yet, then you gotta get to know, because this guy is unreal. As with things like his ultimate Heavenly Blessing, as well as also Conviction of Light applying the punishment debuff, he just offers a ton of damage and can absolutely buff your just any DPS in the game to become really good, which makes him pretty much a must-have if you do want to buff her up at all. And then I thought I'd just end things off by talking about Park Hee-jin, as she is also a really good support for characters like Alicia, and also just any character in general that does like to spam their ultimate. As pretty much if you do actually have Park Hee-jin's 3rd dupe, whenever you use one of her skills, you can increase your entire team's power gauge by 10%, so you can fill it by 10%. And because you do want to use Alicia's ultimate as much as possible, obviously because she's a DPS, then Park Hee-jin will be a perfect pairing, as well as also because the ultimate does also apply 5 instances of the Frost buff to her as well. So then finally, to end things off, we have to talk about what are going to be her best shadows. And I think this is probably going to be her best shadow setup, as if you do already have enough crit rate, then Igris's Commander's Authority or Shadow's Authority isn't going to be like the best thing in the world, so you'll probably want to make use of Baraka's attack increase. And then pretty much it's just sort of you have free reign to do whatever you want depending on what you desire or need. But obviously, of course, you still can use Igris for the crit rate increase if you do need some extra crit stats. But then for the rest of the shadows, obviously, if you're leading with Baraka, if you do need some single target damage, then obviously Igris with his bleed debuff is going to be amazing, as well as also Iron, who does apply defense decreases. But if you're going to feel like you're going to benefit more from tank stuns, then you can also go for him as well. So there you have it. Alicia is an amazing character, and it's definitely what I think someone like Lim Taegu should have been. However, that's not the case, but it doesn't really matter because Alicia is just amazing, so that's great. But yeah, if you did enjoy this video or you found it just useful in general, then don't forget to like and subscribe and click the link down below to support me as a creator, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.